Hello,
Yeah.
I am Zeno Zimmer. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time. It is February 15th, 2020, and I'll be interviewing Dr. Clea Hollis today for the Johnstown African American Heritage Society in Johnstown, Pennsylvania at the Cambria Johnstown Area Heritage Society in historic Cambria City. So. Again, thank you for taking the time with us, and we're just going to start maybe by talking about your family, what brought you to Johnstown, anything you can give us information about to help us with this project.
We moved to Johnstown, a family of four, in officially in 1976, but in 1975, my husband was offered a position as director of secondary education. Since the district did not have an assistant superintendent, he was actually classified as assistant superintendent and resumed the duties of such. So in 1995, he had just earned his doctorate from Kent State University, and we built a new house. And my rationale for building a new house is that I wanted my children to go through school from kindergarten through graduate school as I had done. He agreed to that. And a year after we built the house, he got this offer. He was received a letter inviting him to apply for the position. He left it on the dresser, and then he responded to the letter, and that response was left on the dresser for some time. And so I said to him, either you mail that application or you toss it out. Well, he dropped it in the mail, and surprisingly, he gets a phone call inviting him for an interview. We were very involved in the school district. He had to develop a school, which is now called often they're called an alternative school now, but a focus center, where he had going through the process of desegregating schools in Warren, Ohio. He had students coming from different schools into the focus center, and they had special projects. So they wanted to see him during the week, and he says, my project is too big here. I cannot give up a day, a week, and we don't interview on the weekends. He said, okay, that takes care of that. However, he gets a phone call and says, we will interview on the weekend. And we drove into these mountains, between these mountains, and I said, oh, where are we going? And I says, no way am I going to move here. And as I sat in the Chestnut Street office at that time, he was in there longer and longer and longer, and I picked up the paper and started looking for houses. And on the way home, he said to me, I really would like to work with Dr. Zuko. He was the superintendent of schools at that time. He says, I think I can make a difference here. So that was the beginning of a long story. We came in, he agreed, and we had a housing problem, which I was very surprised with. In 1975, 76, that you're going to have problems with housing, problems with building, problems with builders. And fortunately, we had the First Commonwealth did not give a problem with getting a loan, which I'd heard that had been one of the major problems in the African American community would be getting loans. We had put our house on the market in Warren, Ohio, and there were so many disconcerting calls, disconcerting efforts, that I told him, he says, this is a career move. I said, you go for your career move, and we will follow. And we had two children at the time. My son was in kindergarten. My daughter was in second grade. And when the house was built, I said, we'll move. So we packed up and moved in the middle of the winter. And Ohio is very level.
Right.
And so the moving van moves right up to the house, takes things out. But the moving van, we stopped for dinner. And the moving van, it's about 3 hour drive. The moving van beat us here in January, stuck in the driveway. And we were up on a hill, and so therefore we're walking across this snowy hill. And I'm just about, so he's crazy. But anyway, we go up this scary hill, and we go in. And my daughter, who's very dramatic, she says, "Is this a nightmare or is this for real?" I said, "This is for real."
She was still sleeping, huh? Yeah.
No, she had moved into a nice new home with a already decorated when she moved in, came in from school, and we just drove her to her other house and the bedroom and everything, all wallpapered, right. New carpet. They were young, and a playroom behind the family room. And now she walks in, and it took forever for things to come into Johnstown. You order carpet, it was taking months. And so I finally said, we're just going to move in, and we'll get to have things fixed as we get in. So therefore, she walks into a house that's waiting for carpet, and house was waiting for draperies, and until the draperies were custom made, then we had sheets up at the window. So therefore, this was like walking in, and I said, "This is for real." And so she starts screaming at the top of her lungs. And her dad promised her, he said, "This is a 5-year move." Her dad promised her, "We're not going to move anymore until you get out of high school." I said, "What happened to the 5-year move?" So that was the story there. We moved in. We had moved on the street. Fortunately, everybody was new. They were coming in. Metropolitan was big then. The University of Pittsburgh was new there, and so there were a lot of new people coming in. So fortunately, we moved in, our street became a family. We visit back and forth, we watch each other's children, and so the street became a family, and we settled down, but I'm still looking at getting out. I started to teach, and had some bad job opportunities whereas they look at my credentials, and I would be invited to come in for an interview. And when I went in for an interview, for one, they were surprised that I guess I had chocolate milk on my face. And for the other, they felt in one school district that I was invited to come in, and they knew who I was. But then when they had to go through the board to get confirmation to hire me, they voted, and it came out in a newspaper, so it's documented, that they debated half the night whether or not they could hire an African American teacher in an all-white school district. So that I basically said I have to get better prepared, and went about the business of getting better prepared. And when I did, I finished up my master's, went for my doctorate, and I taught in Richland School District, and I taught in Westmont School District.
Is Richland the original neighborhood that you moved into?
That's the neighborhood I moved into. Richland Township School District.
And this happened pretty quickly, like 1975 you moved, and then how quickly from the time you moved to when you got hired?
Well, how do you say hard? I picked up reading special certification at University of Pitt. I had started before I came.
Okay.
And 75 I moved here. The year of the flood, I think I finished up with my degree. It was hard for a long time sub in Richland for a teacher who took a maternity leave. Okay. And then in Westmont, I was a regular sub on there. From there, I went to wanting something that wake up in the morning and know where I was going. I worked with Cambridge County Head Start for 2 years. And from Cambridge County Head Start, I became the assistant to the president at University of Pittsburgh. Dr. Blackington saw my credentials and had invited me to serve in that position. The affirmative action, there was not an affirmative action position. So I wrote the curriculum. I wrote the job description for the affirmative action activities at UPJ.
Okay.
And I developed the 5 and 3 year affirmative action plan.
Okay. Fantastic.
And I sat in or supervised all employment, faculty and administrative staff.
How many years did you work at UPJ?
15 years.
15 years. Okay.
But before I came here, and you didn't ask me about that,
Right.
before I came here, I had earned my degree
Johnstown.
in Johnstown. Before, and whatever you want to ask me, you can ask me. My life is an open book.
Well, that's why we're here. This is perfect.
Okay. Before I came to Johnstown, I moved to a town similar to Johnstown. When I'm listening to We'll Make the Journey. We moved to a town, Brackenridge, near Corona Heights in Sally Kiski Valley. Prior to coming here, and I was 1 year old, as I was told, when we arrived in Brackenridge, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
We moved to my dad, parents moved to, it's like a Polish-Italian community. And you're familiar with the area, and it was called Ducktown. And it was called Ducktown because I think that is a Polish soup. And you would see ducks hanging on the porch,
Right.
dripping their blood there for the duck soup. So it was called Ducktown.
All because of the soup.
I think it was a soup, the soup name. But I grew up there. And you probably read the article in the paper, but I grew up there, and my dad went into World War II. And it was the most traumatic experience I had in my whole life. I was very close to my dad. I'm named after his mother, who died when he was 16. And I tell everybody, I says, I have 2 older sisters, but my dad saved that name for me. But so I'm the 5th born of 6. And I grew up in a small town. And my dad went to war, and I wrote him every day, and I cried every night for my daddy.
So sweet.
It was very traumatic. I mean, it seems like, and so my mother says she was afraid she was going to lose me. I had lost so much weight, and so I had an aunt, very close, my dad's sister, who basically, when I wasn't in school, I was with her. And she would let me cook and let me do things and so forth. And so it was. I think back over that. I said, I wonder why I was so. I think back, why I was so with Aunt Rosie that much. But I know the trauma, and I used to write him about soaps. I didn't know, 6 or 7 years old. What do you write about? So I wrote him about soaps, even though I didn't understand them. But I wrote every day. So that was the most traumatic thing that has happened to me. Other traumatic things have happened. But when you go through something like that, you say, I can take on anything. So we moved here when my dad worked in the steel mill.
Okay.
And we moved, not here, in Kiski Valley.
Okay.
And when we moved here, there's this family of 6 kids, and my mother. So it was a family of 8, and we went to the neighborhood school district, and I walked to school and walked home at lunch and walked back. That was this lifestyle then. I went through, graduated from Heartbreak High School. It's now called Highlands, and from there I went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, where I got a degree in fashion design. I freelanced in fashion design for about 10 years.
What was the year that you graduated from the Art Institute?
The Art Institute, I graduated from high school in 54, and that would have been 3 years later, 57.
57.
And so I got married in 1962, and I continued it, but it was not. Uh, I enjoyed it, and I was. It was not complementary to marriage because doing holidays and things, you're just working around the clock.
Yeah.
And so I went back after I was married. I went through Youngstown State and Ohio State at the same time, summer one, winter at the other, in 3 years. And with my education degree, graduated cum laude.
Fantastic, congratulations.
And after that, and then I went for the master's, and I'd read special certification in communications for masters. And then when my kids were now in, well, my master's taken at the University of Pittsburgh.
Johnstown.
No, they don't have a graduate program.
Okay, Pittsburgh, Maine.
Yeah.
Do you need to take a little break, or are we good?
My throat was good.
Yeah, it's all good.
So I went to, I get my master's there, and my two children now are in, just jumping back into Johnstown. They are now in, I don't know what grades, but they're in elementary. They're into music, they're into this, they're into that. And I couldn't go to all those things. So they said, "Mommy, please don't work on your doctorate."
Yeah.
So I stopped, and I finished up my doctorate after they took off for college. I took off for college and finished up. My daughter graduated from, both children graduated with honors from the Richland High School. My son was a drum major at Richland High School in 1988. And my daughter was ahead, she was inducted into the Hall of Fame, Sports Hall of Fame a couple years ago. She was a top volleyball player, received a full scholarship to Rutgers University.
So since we're talking about family, can you talk a little bit about like traditions that you may have had, church involvement, holidays, entertainment, things that you and your family did, even things that you did with your father and your mother years ago? Did you carry any of those traditions on?
Yes, definitely. Religion, my family is very religious. And we had, both of my grandfathers were ministers. And so, and my dad was not a minister, but we went to church every Sunday. We were Methodists. We had Methodists in Atlanta, Georgia, Griffin, Georgia. It's where I was born, but it was 1 year when we moved here, and to Pennsylvania. And they were both AME, so both of their fathers. We have a church in Georgia, which was a family church, and was given to the community of Griffin, Georgia by the family. So there's strong religious roots in my family. I recently had my DNA taken and discovered that my paternal grandfather was born in Nigeria.
Wow.
So I don't know if that was slavery. I don't know if he was born a slave priest. I don't know. But I know that what came out that my paternal, and I don't know how they could tell that, my paternal grandfather was born in Nigeria. So coming north, my mother had a lot of health things, and says, "Hey, I have a cold," and she says, "Oh, let me mix this up," and she had ginger and everything mixed together. So many of those traditions and things, yes, she would have brought with us. Plus cooking. Many of the cooking went by. They were very staunch supporters of the church, and so whenever after I got married, it happened, both parents were very active in the church, and people, they thought my mother was a bakery. People would come by on Saturday and pick up their baked goods, and all the money that was taken in for the baked goods, went to the church. Went to the church. You know, I said, what did that cost the flowers? Jeez, oh, that's nothing. But yeah, for that, so the church, it was like a church. They also ran a florist, a home florist, and for holidays. And during holidays, would have the church and different neighbors coming by 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to pick up their flowers, because it was a custom that on Mother's Day, everyone wore a red flower if your mother was living, and a white flower to honor your mother. And Father's Day was in reverse, for the same thing, but red if your mother was living, and white. So my mother, and in that community, because I went to Texas and I had my son and the family wear flowers. And people said, what are the flowers for? So it's not a national custom, but at the time we thought it was. And people came, as I say, all during the night. And then the next morning, even though I'd been up all night delivering and making these flowers, my mother would take the flowers, the corsages, with us to church, and she would stand at the church door, and nobody could go in church unless they were recognizing their mother on Mother's Day. So there was a flower for all those who didn't show up and buy them. It's a sort of a tradition. On Thanksgiving and holidays, the whole family, even when my brothers moved away and my sisters moved away, it was our responsibility to come at Thanksgiving, and we all had families, and so we were all there around the table with extra chairs and so forth for Thanksgiving dinner.
That's great. Who ended up doing most of the cooking for Thanksgiving? Was it a family affair where everybody did a little piece?
My mother did it all until of age, and then the girls took over.
The young ones,
No, I'm the girl.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. I wasn't sure,
and then we took over. But until then, and when I first got married, we'd go and dinner was ready, pies were ready, everything was ready. But then it's up in age, but we still gathered there, and but we went in with it. I would go a day or two early with the intent of preparing and getting the dinner ready.
Hungry already thinking about your dinners. I bet they were amazing.
And they were. My granddaughter, which is part of my diversity training, I showed them an acculturation map, and I tell them first I show them a picture of her, and you can't tell what she is, but and then I have them. Her map consists of sweet potato pie and pumpkin pie. She has 3 countries on her map: Nigerian, Mexico, and the United States. So I said, what culture is she? And they look, and so they guess, and they come around, but she is African American Hispanic, but on there, but she, so on the, and then I said, this is what we all are. We're not all just this. I'm not all just African American. I'm just not all Caucasian. But we are part of all of this. And when we recognize that we have all these different cultures, then we can be more receptive to a different culture. I says, I don't know the difference between a pumpkin pie and a sweet potato pie. And I heard at one school that they were mixing sweet potatoes with pumpkins. So therefore we get set in our ways.
Right.
And I said, we are people, we are what we eat. Or people think what we eat. So on that, but we are stereotyped sometimes by that. I think I'm just talking.
This is fantastic. I appreciate this is what we want. You're doing a wonderful job.
Okay.
Thank you. So besides like culture and tradition is very strong in your family, obviously.
Yeah. Is
there anything outside of like church also? Any clubs, organizations that you were a part of? I
belong to I can't say that organizations came through church, but I have been, I was vice president of the AUW, American Association for University of Women, for a number of years. I was president of the Elizabeth Lindsay Davis Club for a number of years.
It's very famous. It's old history.
It's over
right?
100 years,
Mhm.
over 100 years. And some of the things I have made room for AHS, and so some of them I'm not as active as I was maybe 4 years ago. We have, is that my resume? I was president of the NAACP for 10 years.
Oh, okay.
And I had some of my newsletters or something I'd brought in for Andrew to copy. I served on the Windsor Hospital Board for over 25 years. Until it was changed hands, it's a new name now, soon.
Chan Su Young,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, it's a different name, but at that time, they eliminated all of the members of the board. They have one national board and one local on the national board, and most of them on the board are now national people. So I served there for a number of years. What else have I done? I know I've tried to be a good mother.
You've been involved in everything. That's amazing.
So
that's amazing. Well, just kind of a transition then for talking about community. And you've been involved in so many different organizations and communities, organizations as well.
one of the things that when I started, we're talking about from the beginning when I came, shortly after I was here, I had went to a meeting and there was great concern about students not being prepared to move on. So I wrote a proposal for, at that time it was a PHRC and NAAC preschool. It was sponsored. It was sponsored and funded by Glosser Brothers. I ran that for 16 years on a Saturday morning. But so I ran that for 16 years, and I worked with kindergarten teachers, and I recruit 15 students. I had 2 semesters, 15 students a year, and bring them in. I wanted their exceptional students in the area schools. And I brought a flyer there for them to look at, to consider. And then they would move on, and then I would get another group of kindergarten students, giving them extra skills and extra preparation. And these students were recommended by their kindergarten teacher. And I ran it for 16 years. My 2 children became a part of the staff. And my husband, occasionally when I couldn't make it, he stood in for me. But after 16 years, they were away at college, and it was something I could no longer handle by myself. But for 16 years, I ran it. And after 2 years, the United Way picked it up, and it was funded by the United Way.
That's a legacy that you started, and look who picked it up. That's pretty impressive as well.
Yeah, so I'm there with that. From there, I went to still these students need some help, and there was an incident. I don't know if you want to print it or not, but incident. I'd rather probably not. There was an incident where we had. I picked up the newspaper. My husband was superintendent of the schools, and when he was close enough to it. That's why I said don't print it. And he was close enough to it that he knew students, and he came home and he says he was excited. He says, "I think we're going to have our first black valedictorian, but you can't say anything." One little move, the kid could get a B instead of an A. So it came out. He came in the night before. She said she made it. So I knew I couldn't say anything until the paper came out because I'm not supposed to know this. And the paper came out the next day. It had her picture. It had her as a valedictorian. And somebody else as a valedictorian. So I called the paper. I was so mad. All these years waited. And so I put in a phone chain where I called everybody I knew, and they all pounced on the newspaper, and it was retracted the next day. And it could have been an innocent error. It was retracted the next day, but no one sees a retraction. So I was talked with Mom, Clea Jones, for instance, and I called her and I said, I'm just so upset about this. There are bright minority students. I had a lot of bright ones in the Saturday morning class. I says, but none of them never seem to be getting recognition. And she says, why don't we start our own? So we started the Greater Johnstown Minority Scholars Club. And right now it's 35 years old. And every year I send letters, which I will do next week, send letters to the area counselors, guidance counselors, requesting students, minority students, with in ninth grade with a B or better average. We bring them together, or bring them together for spring roundup. I would tell the parents what we're about. We have, at this time, we have 4 endowed scholarships with the Community Foundation. For the students, in order to apply for it, must be a member of the Minority Scholars Club. Right. So we bring them in, we tell them what we're about, and we have a reception every year for them and their parents. And we recognize everybody with a certificate, but then we present the scholarships to the senior of the year and provide and give them a send off. We're over, we do about 30 a year, so 30 years, do the math, over probably 10,000 or so students were processed. I don't have enough.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And the students have, and right now, things are better now where there are. I go and I say, oh, minority students are getting scholarships, they're being recognized as exceptional.
Good. Well, here's a question then that I was gonna add, since you brought up talking about students now. How has Johnstown changes in the African American community changed since you grew up, from Georgia to Ohio, Pennsylvania? How has it changed? What changes do you see now?
I can't say I saw any changes in Georgia because I was 1 year old.
1 year old, true.
So, and then when I went to school, when you're in a situation, you see it just as it is. Mm-hmm. So I went to a school, and in my graduating class there were 200 students. I was the only girl of color. There were 3 boys, and they were football players, and they were bus students who were bused in from another district, consolidated school district. So going this way, when I've been out in the world, I discovered that coming to Johnstown, I found out it was discovered. I had never heard of or attended an all-black school. So when I had my first job in working in Pittsburgh, and I'm talking to different people, and they're saying was not part of my experience. So I can't say. I do know when I went for a job, when Acme was moving to town, and my girlfriends were not people of color because there weren't any at the school. They were saying, oh, we got a job at Acme. Why did you go down? So I probably was 16 or 17. So I'd go to the Acme, which had just built a new store there. I took my application, and I waited to see him, and the manager came out and ripped it up in my face and says, we don't hire cowards.
Can you tell me what year this is?
I had to be 16 to work, and I was still in high school. So 17, I graduated from high school in 1954, so it's probably 1953.
So in high school, you didn't really experience any issues of race, but it was more when you started looking outside of
my neighborhood.
Okay.
And then I went to at my first job, which was very surprising, at a local department store, and my self-esteem was very high. My parents, I guess, always made me feel like I was somebody.
Mhm.
That's what parents are supposed to do.
Right.
Because when I think I mentioned for the job that I applied for, and so I got a call from a friend. They says, "I can't believe that you went there looking for a job." And I says, "Why?" She says, "Nobody in Johnstown would step up to that all-white district looking for a job." I never thought of it. So when I mentioned the incident when my first teaching incident, I was a black teacher standing in front of a white student body. I had one black student. I don't think he knew he was black, but there was one black student. And so when the mother said, "You had chocolate milk on your face," I don't think the little boy had come in and maybe he saw his other friend just as another student. It was wholesome. So when they advertised for a teacher, and I'm trying not to say it because I think hopefully things have changed now, but it was outlining. So I went when they were advertising. I went. I never thought. I didn't even know. It never crossed my mind it was an all-white school district.
Mhm.
And when I get the news, it was in the paper. That's how I found out. I didn't even get a phone call rejecting me. I said, until I got when Clea called me and I said, "How would you know I went out and applied?" She said, "Oh, it's in the paper." I never got a courtesy of a call saying that, you're rejected. But so I'm there. So no, I feel that, and maybe it's good that my background was the way it was, because when I take on, I do it with, I deserve it. My credentials say that I deserve it.
That's all that matters.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It shouldn't make any other difference.
Yeah, no, that's to say. So maybe it has influenced me in one way or the other. My dad always said, "Be the best that you can. Whatever you're doing, be the best you can." So I went about.
Do you feel that there's a generational gap between the 1970s, 1980s from today?
I would hope so. I would hope that when someone graduates from college and they are able and they have the credentials, or not even necessarily graduate from college, whatever they do, if they're the best that's applying, then that's the one you should be looking at. And so I would hope there is some changes. Since I'm not in a job market, when I graduated from when college, I had my first teaching job. When I had my first teaching job, I just never. I get my student teaching there, and the principal called me and I said, "Are you graduating this year? Are you on time?" I said, "Yes," and he said, "I have an opening. I want you."
Well, here's a question, and that's, since you grew up during the civil rights movement in the 60s, you graduated high school, how did that affect you as a person in Johnstown at that time? Did it really make or change the way you felt about Johnstown? It seems to me that it had a generational effect on a lot of people.
I moved here in '75, so the '60s, terrible '60s that we had passed through. And in my hometown, even though I had not experienced these things until I hit out of school, and I did, and then I began to know when I applied for jobs, just like the Acme being.
Right.
I applied for coming out of the Art Institute with my credentials there. I was voted as #1 in the class in my, and I was referred to. I was referred to go for a position at Gimbel's department store because they were looking for a millionaire. I was Saks Fifth Avenue, a millionaire, and I went in with my hat box and my little special made, little green feathered one with it on the top of your head, And I felt very proud of my work. And I was actually freelancing, and I had a large amount of customers around who came back, wealthy ladies. You could afford me. And I go in with my hat box and to show my samples of my work. And the milliner, first I go and I sit down, and I'm sitting down in a waiting room, and someone come in and look out. And they close the door and they go back in. I says, I should tell them that's me. And they come out and they look out. And so finally on the third time to the door, they said, would you be Clea Patrick? I said, yes, I am. So I said, I know you were looking for me, but so I go in. That should have been a sign for me. But I go in with my hat box and show my wares, and I could see the expression on her face. You know, just like, oh my. And a couple of them she tried on. She was just taken back. And she says, I'll get back to you next week. Well, the milliner had retired. And at that time they did custom made hats. So she had retired, and she was 70, or maybe older than that. But I didn't hear from anybody. So I go back in 2 weeks later to see if the position had filled. And you know that 90-year-old lady was going to come back to work? She was saying, you're not going to get hired.
Right.
Yeah. She decided not to go into retirement. But at that age, you weren't working past 65.
Yeah.
Now, I said, maybe now. I said, 70, maybe now. No, 65, people were worn out at 65 back then. And so, again, I walked out with sort of saying, hey. Yeah. And maybe she could not have told me that. Maybe she went to the management, so forth, and said, oh no, we can't.
So as a teacher, you mentioned about there's a type of innocence with younger students not knowing what culture or race means. Did you ever find it difficult as a teacher? Did you ever encounter a type of racism, possibly?
No, I didn't encounter the type of racism inside the classroom. I don't think it was pertained to me. The one particular, which I shouldn't have been, I was subbing, and I went in, and all the students were sitting there, and I thought, oh my gosh, some of these kids are bigger than I am. And so when the bell rang to start class, this girl stood up. She could have made pounded on me, and I would disappeared. She stood up and she says, Mrs. Hollis, may I ask you one question? And I says, what is that? I thought it was going to be racial or something. Do you know anything about sewing? Because they had assigned me to a home ec class. And I think it was, I might be wrong, I think it was for me to fail. And I said to her, well, let me put it this way. I graduated from Art Institute. I design and make my own patterns. And I named certain things. And the boys in the class, and she raised her hand. And they all went to their lockers and got their materials. She says, we have a lot of teachers coming in here. They don't know anything about sewing. And we mess up our fabric. So I walked around, I gave them some little hints, professional hints, to make their work look custom made. But in the window, I saw the principal bearing through the window. I says, we'll put her in here, we'll show her she can't. Yeah, I think they were looking to see me fail. Yeah. And that was just an assumption on there. But no, so I haven't had the problem with students. I have had problems with the interaction or even with hiring me because of my complexion. But I haven't had even problems. I had 6th and 7th grade girls. I could take a break when I was at the middle school. They'd come in and they want to talk during their lunch hour. they want to talk about their mothers, but they want to talk on their my lunch hour or talk to in their free time. And always I had someone sitting there just to talk. And sometimes that's what that teenage group needs. They need someone to talk to. So, but does that answer your question?
It does, it does. I mean, Dr. Hollis, I appreciate you taking the time to answer. So there's a few more questions I'd like to ask though, but I know sometimes with the topic of racism, it could be, you know, an uncomfortable subject.
I've lived with this all my life, even when I didn't know I was one.
And I understand, and so we appreciate that, so taking the time. And I just, not to dwell on the same subject, but that's what interests me because of the lack of diversity sometimes that I see, you know, in Johnstown, in the country, in this world. So you mentioned that there's issues with hiring. It seems like the issue of racism, did it follow you when it came to going to a new job? Was it just in Johnstown? Can you describe a little bit about that?
No, I can't say it was just in Johnstown. Probably I've been here longer than I've been anyplace else. Been here 45 years. I had, when I was, as I mentioned, I had modeled for a store. And what is that? 18-inch waistline. But I modeled for a store, and with modeling, I had modeled with. I was the only model of color, and I'd go in, pick out my clothing, and modeled. And after it was for luncheon, and clothes were provided by a department store. And after we were modeled, they were headed for the dining room with the girls I modeled with, and I was stopped and told me that my plate was set in the kitchen. I could model with the girls, but people could buy the clothes off my back, but I couldn't eat with them. So, you know, I need a job. So like, no offense, but your plate is set in the kitchen. And so the others ate with the crowd who came for the fashion show and for dinner.
And that would be after the Art Institute. So
this would
50s?
This would be in the 50s, yeah.
Okay.
So that was out. When I was going to the Art Institute, I was working, and I would leave for work and go into school, which was the Pittsburgh, which is about an hour from my little town. And I would run in and get my lunch, hop on the bus and eat on the lunch. And for some reason, it was early this day, or the bus was late. I didn't think the bus was late. It was early or something, or maybe. And I went in and I said, I ordered, and I said, I'll eat here. And he brought the food with me in a bag. And I said I was going to eat here. He said, oh no, he says, collards can't eat in a store. I says, if I can't eat in the store, you can keep that bag. So yeah, that was type of thing. But in my little town, in my family, and knowing where to go and not to go, and of course money was very limited, so I didn't go too many places. I experienced that after high school and going into, we had in the incident, I don't know if you're referring to, when with the skating ring, and that was in my hometown, North Johnstown. And my brother was a senior, and maybe he was out of school, but anyway, I know I had to be 16 because I was driving my dad's car. And so I picked up girlfriends, and we went to the skating ring, and my brother was going to come with his friends, and they never got into the skating ring. And so when we're skating around, I passed one of these doors. You have the doors open because it gets so hot in there. Yeah. And I rolled over to John. I says, what happened to you? He says, we're not allowed in. The manager says, we're not allowed in. So I went to see the manager. And I said, why is my brother allowed in? He says, we don't allow colored boys in because they're too rough. So I rounded up my friends, we went and asked for a refund, and we left. We told him we'd meet him outside, so we met him outside, and he followed us to my minister, is at AME Church, followed him to the church, and we met with the minister there was Reverend Jarvis, and it's interesting that I understand that he had been a minister here in Johnstown before coming to Tarentum. And so we went to see him. We called in the NAACP, and we went back, and finally at that time, they, with us coming back repeatedly, was going to give us a Wednesday night that coloreds could skate.
So they had to do a special night.
They were going to do a special night.
Instead of just, yeah.
So that special night did not satisfy us. And we kept going back and back. And we challenged him. He said, this is a public place. We challenged him on the context of public.
Excuse me.
You have more than 5 people coming. It's not public. It's not family. So he ended up, rather than give us more, allowing us to skate where we wanted to, closing up the skating ring. So the skating ring was closed. So nobody skated.
Still, it's sad it had to come to that after all that.
And this is what happens here. You know, there are laws on the books, equal pay laws for women and other things, and the manager, the owner knows it's wrong, and they kind of get along way with it as law until they're
So they get caught.
challenged, until they're challenged, and then they have to make an option, either abide by the law, pay a penalty, or close. And in the early days, they would close. The prejudice was so strong then, they would close.
Do you see a difference? I think there has been a difference, obviously, from that time to where we are today. But what sort of challenges do you still see today that are part of that situation that happened decades ago?
The challenges, as I see, since I'm not in a job market, and in the recent years, jobs have come to me instead of me going for them, so maybe that is a good thing. But the challenges, I think now, and even with minorities, I think the challenge is equal pay. And sometimes we're able to get the jobs because they feel that we will come for less, work for less, and stay for less. And so therefore, there's so many, and if you're going to challenge this, and you're going to get legal help, that's an awful lot of money. Most people don't have the money, most females nowadays, they don't have the money. If they're in low-paying jobs, how are they going to have the money to basically raise this? So that is the issue now of many places. I can remember the day where they're, and I did a diversity training with Bruce Hausler group. I tell them there are stereotypes. There are bias stereotypes you're not even aware of. There are, and one of the examples is I said, women belong in the kitchen. And my son is actually a better cook than my daughter. And he goes through and he does the roast, he does everything. And growing up, that's a difference in society. My husband always said, oh, I don't want him in the kitchen. I don't want him to be a panty waste. I never knew what a panty waste was. But so whenever he calls and says, I'm on my way home, can I bring milk or eggs or something? I get 15 minutes to bring him home, I get him out of the kitchen for my son. And now I go, and he has 3 kids, and he's making the pancakes, and he's doing everything. I said, oh, your dad should see you now. But yeah, I think now, even though women are unfortunately, they're more single woman homes, it's saying single men. It's not that couple that used to be.
Mhm.
It's not the norm.
The family
The
dynamic.
family's very dynamic, but still, women in many cases are making less than the men. Minorities are making less than their white counterpart. And I see that still existing, and I've talked to some, and I've said, you know, why don't you sue? I don't have suing money. And I can't take the risk of finding another job. So that is a challenge. And I think it's a humane thing that someone should look at their book. So they've hired two people. Why would you gonna bring one in for less than the other? Because it saves them money and they can get away with it.
So of the three, one or two more questions if that's okay, or topics. So when I think of Johnstown, and me not being from here, the
Where
things
you
that I know,
from?
originally I'm from Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's a long story, but
That's very
yeah,
diverse.
it's very diverse. As you can see, it's a culture shock for me too a little bit, you know. But I was in the military, was on the East Coast, and I've kind of been here ever since.
My daughter was in Compton, I guess 2 weeks ago, and she gave her, no, it was just last Wednesday, and she gave a presentation there. She has her own business in diversity, and she is number 25 on workplace bullying. And so she gets invited to talk on it. So she was at Compton, University of Compton, and was surprised to find out when she gets there, it's next door to Watts, and there's so many, and it's, Los Angeles is a very diverse community.
It is.
Very diverse community. But she fared.
well, Johnstown's not quite that diverse, obviously, but so, and that's what I was gonna bring up is the changes that you've seen in Johnstown from 1977. I think of the flood in 1977. I think of the closing of the mills, and I think of some of the new challenges that Johnstown faces today. There seems to be a bad narcotic addiction problem that Johnstown has. So with those three big issues that have happened in Johnstown, how has Johnstown and the African American community especially overcome the challenges to push through those challenges? And they've done it in every single instance.
We've done it in every, and so there are different things. Like narcotics is one that's now on the table. And I think it goes back, even though we don't have the family unit as we once knew it. But it needs to be a strong person with strong values in the home. To basically let that child or the young one who's in their care knowing that they care. I told my grandson turned 14 yesterday, and when I was visiting during the holidays, I said, you know, you're gonna be 14. He says, when he gets 5, he talked to me about being born on Valentine's Day, and everyone thinks he's a little new kid with a barrel, bow and arrow. But now it's for larger talk, and he has he's a gifted student, but he's a boy. And I said that sort of with tongue in cheek. His sisters are scholars, but as far as academics and everything, but he's much brighter than they are, but they get better grades because they apply himself. I said, you know, you're turning 14 in 5 years. You're going to be taking care of yourself. Hopefully not a family, but you're going to be taking care of yourself. Are you going to ask your dad for money to come see grandma? Hit those books. So when you're out, you can name your job. You have the ability. Hit the books so you can name your job. And I think this is what parents need to do. I think the gaming, where the computers, it was on the Today Show last week, is saying that many students are having mental problems from the gaming. And it's not the gaming itself, they have sleep deprivation. They're up all night all night. They fall out and sleep.
Mhm.
And then they go to sleep, or they take something to stay awake. And they're missing out on many of the things that should be taken in because of the gaming. And they said the cell phone is a great, parents first with the splitting families. At one time, the cell phone came out, many parents would not have their children have cell phone, they restricted them. But then with the division in families, then one parent want to make sure they can keep touch of this child, or there's not somebody there in that home. So they need to get touch. So they've given them the phone for necessity purposes, but then it extends to pleasure. And I was visiting, and my granddaughter, I says, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to bed." I says, "With your phone?" I said, "Oh no, your phone stays out here. Grandma says your phone stays out here." And so "I just want it to land beside me." I says, "No, it's gonna be here." So I laid down on the bunk bed, because she's in bunk beds, and I laid down in the bunk bed underneath her, and I could still hear her up there. And so I pretend I was asleep, and I started snoring, and I got louder. Snoring. I guess she said, "Grandma's good to sleep now." So I saw one foot come down. Second little foot come down. When she got to the end, I reached up and grabbed her leg.
She was trying to get that phone back.
She gotta get that phone. She says, I said, "Now go back up there. You're not getting your phone tonight, and I'm going to sleep for real." So it shocked her. But I think there needs to be more. I think parents need to be parents. Instead of being talked and bargained with and everything, parents need to be parents. And I think that is what's wrong with and nowadays, it's a younger generation or younger minded. Some parents are doing these things too. They're sharing the drugs with the kids.
They could be just as bad. They can be the enablers.
Yes.
Yep.
Or giving them at first, "I want to see how you react." So I think young adults need to take responsible for their young children and realize that even though you're sitting in a morgue crying over your kid, you may have caused this. Stop it, give back and make them feel that they are important within themselves without that extra tough love, they used to call it, tough love.
So, not trying to get into a psychology discussion, but when it comes to Johnstown in the future, you mentioned how important parenting is a part of it. Tough love, as you mentioned. How much do they really learn from their parents? I think, personally speaking, a parent can reflect what their children think as well. So I agree with you in saying that it has to start with the parents and them teaching. Do you think that the future of Johnstown can be made into a positive environment for everybody? Because it's changed so much in the time that I've been here. As I mentioned, the mill's closing. I know that's something that my wife's brought up. That's changed the whole dynamic of Johnstown with closing, people leaving Johnstown, and also the parenting aspect. So if you got to name one thing, you mentioned family. Do you stand by that as the one thing that needs to change in Johnstown to make
I think it's the most important thing. And I think family need, and whether it's an extended family or not, maybe whether it's any type of family, family is described and recognized at different levels. But whatever that family is, it needs to take responsibility. And as I was mentioning the incident with the chocolate milk, this kid had not been taught by it. His only school, that's before he had preschool and all that, his only school had been the parent, had been the home. So these things had not been taught in the home, or negative names been thrown out there in the home. So he comes to school, he's interfacing with other students, and he is learning what the other students, and he must have a strong enough conviction, a strong enough understanding to basically, I talk about the person in the environment, to be the person in the environment to make a difference. If the parents have been the person in the environment to make a difference, and it's make it strong enough, then that child will step up and speak out. And show another, I'm in, with different incidents. My son, when he was in high school, he had friends over for a weekend. And the friends over for the weekend, not for the weekend, for a football game. And they're all in the family room. They're sprawled all over the family room. Bean bags and chairs and everything. And they ate all the brownies, and they went in the kitchen to make up some more brownies. And it was halftime. And one of the fellows, one of his very good friends, happened to be Chinese. But that fellow wasn't there that time. He was the only one in the room with a person of color. But they're all over and they're laughing and talking. And this one fellow jumped up and he squinted his eyes and started imitating what he, like a comic strip. And I said, oh my gosh, in my home this is happening. I spoon down and go in and address this because I'm an outsider. This is a bunch of boys. My son stood up. He waited until the laughter stopped, and he says, no, next week sorry. He sat down, there was a silence. They went back to the game. And so I stressed the person in an environment to make a difference. If you teach your child, I thought I did a good job. If you teach your child to be the person in the environment, to stand up for right, others will follow key. Others will see their ignorance. Others will not want to be identified as such. And this I have seen with my son and my daughter. They don't hesitate to stand up and speak out about something. And I teach students, you need to be the person in the environment.
How proud must have you been when you heard your son say that? That's
amazing.
I
I didn't say anything then, but after they left, I told him how proud I was of such a thing, so doing such. But you need to be, and I think that's the only thing parents can do. Instead of parents starting this, or jumping up and discovering that one kid's there, I'm gonna be a comedian, then have someone there or chastise it yourself. I would have gone in myself. I was glad I didn't have to. It was more effective with him doing it.
That's wonderful. I think that's it. I just, on behalf of Jaha and the African American Heritage Society, this has been a fantastic interview.
Yeah.
Especially the way we ended it. I think I think what you said at the very end just gives